The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass. I am your host, Bobby Williams. Good to have you here. Please leave a comment, tell a friend, subscribe to our Spotify. Help us get this out there. We need your help. Today's topic is ethics. We all want our children to grow up to be ethical people. But that's not just something that happens naturally. It's something that you actively have to work on. Our guest today has given a lot of thought to this topic, Barbara Coloroso, and she is the author of the best-selling book, Just Because It's Not Wrong Doesn't Make It Right, From Toddlers to Teens, Teaching Kids to Think and Act Ethically. Additionally, she's also done work in Rwanda. She's a former nun, which I didn't know about until we were talking before the interview. And just full of wisdom, full of great ideas. So we're going to dive right into it. But first, here's a quick word from our sponsor, AmeriGroup. We're all filling a lot of different roles in life. Parent, coworker, friend. Well, AmeriGroup offers whole care for the whole you. It's all covered. Doctor visits, prescriptions, extra vision benefits, and even help gain your GED. Visit chooseamerigroup.com/WA.
Human being. I had the experience in between those books to work in Rwanda with orphans from the 1994 genocide, where in 100 days, almost 1 million human beings were macheted to death. And it grounded me in looking at how this kind of horrific event could occur and what does it take to raise people who will stand up for values and speak out against injustices. So I realized in my Kids Are Worth It work, talking about giving them opportunities to make choices and decisions and mistakes, and then hold them accountable for what they had done, was just the beginning of how to truly consciously raise an ethical human being.
Well, I think, it's interesting. You talk about religion and you talk about Rwanda, and it seems like values or morals can be so different. Like you think about 100 years ago, people had really different values, or even people today where they've warped it in their head. They're doing something ethical, but it's really like a totally messed up thing to do. I'm sure you have thoughts on that.
I do. And one of my experiences again in Rwanda was looking at women and men of various faith traditions who had actually contributed to the genocide actively. And then men and women of faith traditions, all different faith traditions, and people who didn't have a faith tradition willing to stand up and speak out and rescue people. And that fascinated me. And I went back and talked to people years later who had actually helped rescue people at great expense or cost to themselves, including now 2 young adults who were 7 and almost 9, who literally rescued the 9-year-old's classmate and family during the genocide. And so it was fascinating to me, even young people. And when I asked the young boy why he did it, now he's a grown adult, and he never told anybody except his sister knew. And he said, how could I not? He was my classmate. Not he was my friend. He was a relative. He was my classmate. How could I not? And digging a bit deeper, they talked about the fact that their grandpa had helped rescue other Tutsis. And I said, where did you spend most of your growing up years? With your mom or your dad or your grandpa? And the answer was fascinating. They spent it with their grandpa, who refused to allow other people in his presence to denigrate another human being.
Wow. I think the idea, it's interesting, just violence and the thoughts around it. And you look at media and it's like violence is really, it's just depicted as fun. Like you see Spider-Man like hitting someone and it's like that's entertaining. So why is it that sort of the most interesting stuff in the media seems to be the things that are worse for us? And then how can we teach children to be a little bit more aware about what they're consuming?
Media is an interesting topic unto itself. I talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the indifferent, where these games are put together with a lack of indifference for the harm they may be causing. And there's a lot of controversy today about witnessing violence and what it does to young people. And I put it in the context of witnessing violence online and offline and what it does to a person's sense of well-being and their relationship to the other. Martin Buber said, I am I and you are thou. I'm unique and you're unique, and we have a common humanity. Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, we're interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. However, to do these horrible, unethical acts requires that we see the other as either less than us, an enemy, somebody who is a threat to me. And so think about the video games that involve that. We are desensitizing young people when they are online consistently viewing, or now not even viewing, but interacting, where they see everything as a threat. It numbs them again to the violence, but it also can make them more fearful. It can also make them less likely to see a stranger in a positive light. So we do have to tune into that. Now, you're not going to remove it totally. And so what's real important is to recognize how vulnerable are your children, your individual children. Each one of them are different. One may be able to engage in it and not be affected by it because they don't care to do it very often. And they are very caring, sensitive human beings to begin with. And they'll play the game to be social with other kids, but they will gravitate toward other more constructive things. But you also might have a child who is more inclined to strike out, to be more aggressive. And that's the child you want to watch the amount of time they're spending on this and trying to find more conducive games to play.
I think a core parenting idea is just being active and involved. And I think that's what you were kind of getting at.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that we can talk to them. They're going to experience, we can't put them in a bubble or bubble wrap them, as some have proposed, to protect them from everything. But you look at age appropriate, ability appropriate, just like you look at any way you're raising your children. Do you look at what they're capable of doing and what's age appropriate? And do you constantly increase responsibilities and decision-making and decrease limits and boundaries? So that by the time they're in their later teens, they have developed their own inner discipline, their own sense of self. They're capable of making their own decisions and can move forward. But that takes time and effort. It doesn't just happen. Yeah. And it's so important that we walk our talk and talk our walk.
I've read you say before, it's not okay to just be not racist or not bigoted. You have to actively be anti-racist. And another thing I've heard from you is one of the reasons children behave ethically, at least when they're younger, is the fear of getting caught. But then when you think about like the internet or something, or everyone having a cell phone, that's not there so much. Like there's not as much pressure to act decently. And so like talking trash to random so-and-so on the internet, it's like it doesn't even matter, but it does matter. How do you get kids to realize that it matters?
Well, again, it's walking your own talk and talking your own walk. You don't just model for them good behavior, you actually talk about it. I had the opportunity now in this bubble to help my one grandson, because we are all bubbling together, to do online learning. And he was online, and I was in the kitchen listening to this very good teacher. And she asked a young girl a question, and she gave an answer. And the teacher right there said to another child, "You rolled your eyes. That was mean. That was cruel. And I will see you after class." I mean, her whole demeanor changed.
Yeah.
But what she was doing is even online saying, "Not here, no more, never." And that's what we have to be. I was so pleased because all the other kids knew that is, even rolling your eyes can be mean and cruel. And I think, and I know our young grandson was curious as what's happening to him after class. And he had to do some public things the next day on Zoom with his classmate. And the classmate had been supported by the teacher. So we need to do that. We need to be aware of what our kids are tuned into.
You talk about punishment versus discipline.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's an example of discipline. But what's the difference, I guess?
It's a very important distinction. We often confuse those words and we merge them together as if they're the same. Punishment is something we do to a child. Discipline is something we do with a child to give life to that child's learning. It does 4 things punishment can never do. Shows them what they've done wrong, gives them ownership of the problem, gives them ways to solve it. And most importantly, it does something punishment will never do. It leaves a child's dignity intact. That teacher nailed that kid right there, but talked to him afterwards and gave him a way to come back the next day to honor the young girl, to admit what he had done. There was not a reason for an "I'm sorry," unless it's heartfelt, but you've got to own what you did, figure out how you're going to keep it from happening again, and find a way to heal with that young person. And that's that restorative justice piece when you've harmed somebody. But discipline isn't just for the mean and cruel things. Giving life to a child's learning, you want to develop self-discipline. A 3-year-old breaks a glass. A 16-year-old drops a beaker in a lab class. Both of them have made a mistake. So and you say, do you need to discipline when it's a mistake? Absolutely, because it's giving life to their learning. It's not punishing them. It's not doing something to them for the mistake they made. Discipline is used in 3 situations: when a kid makes a mistake, when they create mischief or cause mayhem. And by the way, all bullying, like rolling your eyes, calling somebody gross names, attacking them online, ostracizing them, cutting them out of games, locking them out, that's mean and cruel. That is never a mistake or mischief, just to be clear on that. But a 3-year-old breaks a glass or their 16-year-old, there's 3 things you do to discipline. You have them own it, fix it, and learn from it and move on. Own it. They broke it. Don't blame it on it was slippery or whatever. They broke it. So own it. Now, a 3-year-old can't pick up glass any more than a 16-year-old can pick up caustic material. But the teacher can have an opportunity there to show the whole class how to pick up caustic material. The 3-year-old, you can say, whoa, you have a problem. Run, get me a bag. Give them something to do. They run, get the bag. They hold the bag. You put the glass in. They help mop the floor up. And then you say, which of these 2 plastic glasses would you like to use today? Which says to a youngster, when I make a mistake, and we all make mistakes, I need to own it, fix it, learn from it, move on. Now, what if it's mischief? I use the example of a mistake is accidentally marking on something. Mischief is where you do tic-tac-toe on the wall. Mayhem is writing a child's name in a gross term on the wall.
Yeah.
3 different intents, all marking on the wall. The first is a mistake where they accidentally mark on something. Tic-tac-toe is intentional, but it doesn't harm anybody. That's mischief. What do you do with mischief? You show them what they've done wrong, Give them ownership of the problem. It isn't that you're going to wipe the wall down or you're going to send them to the room, which is punishment. No, you don't rescue them. You don't punish them. You say, okay, there's a marking on the wall. You don't even ask, why did you do that? That's called a silly question because they probably can't give you a good answer, but you need to fix that. And what they realize, I don't have to lie about it. I'm not going to get paddled. I'm not going to get my Game Boy taken away from me, all of which can be punitive. I just need to get it off the wall. So you show them what they've done wrong. You tic-tac-toe on the wall, give them ways to solve it. And this is where some kids are clueless. They don't know how to solve a problem. So you give them options. Well, you could try washing it off. If that doesn't work, you might want to use a little Clorox wipe. If that still doesn't work, you may have a major job. It's called painting the wall. So you give them options, show them what they've done wrong, give them ownership. It's their problem, not yours. Give them ways to solve it. Most importantly, in the same process, you're leaving their dignity intact. So when a kid makes a mistake, own it, fix it, learn from it, move on. When it's mischief, show them what they've done wrong, give them ownership, give them ways to solve it, leave their dignity intact. If it's mayhem, I use the 3 R's. Restitution, own what you did and fix it the best you can. Now, calling somebody a gross name is real hard to fix. Yeah, I want young people to understand when you've gotten into the mayhem category, it often involves serious harm, and you're going to have to think about that. But think about it. If you give kids ownership when they make mistakes and they create mischief, they are less likely to cause mayhem. If you have combined that with the sense that you're unique and that other human being is unique, I tell kids, you do not have to like every kid in this classroom, but you must honor their humanity. Treat them with dignity and regard. And so restitution, resolution. I want you to tell me how you're going to keep from doing that again. Well, I won't ever call him a bad name. I won't ever roll my eyes again. I won't ever lock him out of a chat room. Well, that's good. That's what you won't do. Tell me what you will do. And this is again where your wisdom comes in, because they might go, I don't know. Call her by her given name. Nod your head when she's speaking. You can disagree without being disagreeable. You don't need to lock her out of a chat room. You can have a private chat and say, what you're doing here is annoying to all the others. And I know that you can do this differently, giving them ways to even interact with the person that they've targeted. And then most importantly, to heal with the person you've harmed.
I want to close on the idea of forgiveness. You know, we were talking about like the Rwanda genocide. And I've heard you say that forgiveness is actually, it's in your own self-interest to forgive. So explain that, and how can we encourage forgiveness for our children?
Recognizing, first of all, that the only things you really need to forgive are the bigger issues. But first we have to be kind to ourselves. That I'm unique and you're unique. And one of the things I learned from our children's godfather, Father Martin Lawrence Janko, some may be old enough to remember, he was kidnapped in Lebanon. With the Lebanon 7. They were 7 Americans who had been kidnapped throughout Beirut. And he wrote a book, Bound to Forgive. And he was my husband's mentor. He was the priest at our wedding, but he was also our kid's godfather. And he came to heal at our home and help get his book going. And what he realized was that if he didn't forgive them, it would eat at him. The Chinese have a beautiful saying, those who seek revenge had best dig 2 graves. So the most self-healing thing you can do is to not ever accept the deed, but still honor the human being who may have done a despicable deed. You don't have to be, and again, when I was working with the Gacaca, the healing circles in Rwanda, one of the young orphans as an adult welcomed into a Gacaca, a healing circle, the man who had slaughtered his family. And he was ready to move on himself. Now, his wife, who also had experienced that, said, no, I do not want this person. I don't want to see them ever again. And so President Kagame asked me at that point, what do you do with people who will not meet with the person who has harmed them as part of the healing? I said the same thing I said to Clarissa. And that was, don't lose your caring self. Because if you do, the genocidaires have won. That if you strike back in an anger and a need for revenge, they will have won because it will deaden you. Now that's a big extreme, but that's where I learned from Marty, who was kidnapped and tortured, and from the people in Rwanda, that there isn't a one size fits all for forgiveness. And one of the most profound things Marty said to me is that forgiveness is not a verb. And my editor said, of course it's not, it's a noun. And what he was talking about, it isn't something you have to do to the other person or for the other person. It's about you. And it helps you heal. And it takes time. It's not something you can rush, but honoring that you have the dignity and worth, what they did to you was not right. And that you can move on, that it is a thread in your tapestry of your life. But that thread doesn't have to choke you.
We cover a wide range of topics on the show. And a lot of what it comes back to is, how are you behaving as a parent? What are you modeling for your children? And that's a lot of what I'm hearing you say today. So
exactly.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It's always a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure too, Bobby. I appreciate the opportunity. And stay well and breathe deeply.
Thank you, Barbara. Our first repeat guest on the show. So that's something special. After the interview, Barbara and I were talking, and I wish I would have just kept recording because she just has so many interesting, wise words to share. So, Barbara, we're always glad to have you on the show. That's our program. A big thank you to Family Education and Support Services for making this whole thing happen, and to Amerigroup. So we'll see you next week on the Parental Compass. Peace.